My name is Captain Laura Hayes, retired, U.S. Army. 20 years of service, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. I've stood in dust storms so thick they turn noon into midnight. I've heard the thud of mortars landing far too close. I've folded flags over coffins and saluted until my right shoulder ached. But nothing prepared me for the day my own family turned on me in a courtroom. It happened in a heartbeat. My brother-in-law Thomas shot up from his chair like a spring-loaded jack-in-the-box face, blotchy red eyes wild. He pointed a shaking finger at me and bellowed, "She stole that medal!" Every head in the room swiveled toward me. The courtroom fell into that eerie silence you only hear in 2 places before a firefight starts. And when something you can't take back has just been said. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, casting their cold, unforgiving glare over everyone. I could hear the faint rustle of legal pads as the stenographer stopped typing for just a breath. I didn't flinch. My boots stayed planted on that cheap, scuffed linoleum floor. I didn't glance at my attorney, didn't scan the crowd for allies. I just stared at Thomas and let him finish digging his own grave with every word. "You have no right to it," he shouted. "It belongs to our family. You only married into it. You're nothing." I could feel the older folks in the back row squirm. You don't tell a veteran, especially a widow, that she's nothing in front of a judge without drawing some heat. The judge's brows lowered like storm clouds. And yet, even as my pulse quickened, I wasn't shocked. Not really. I'd been waiting for this moment for years. 3 years earlier. The first time Thomas hinted he wanted my late husband's silver star, we were standing in my kitchen, coffee steaming between us. He said it casually, like he was talking about borrowing a tool. Wouldn't it be nice if that medal was displayed at Dad's old lodge so everyone could see it? I had smiled politely and told him it's staying with me for Michael. It was his father's wish. Michael. My son was only 8 then, but he understood that the medal wasn't just a chunk of ribbon and metal. It was the proof of who his father had been, a man who'd carried his buddy to safety while under fire, who'd taken a round to the chest because he refused to leave a man behind. Thomas's smile had been tight, almost brittle. "Well, we'll see," he'd said. That "we'll see" turned into years of side comments, of whispered accusations, when he thought I couldn't hear, of cold shoulders at family gatherings. At first, I ignored it. I thought maybe grief had twisted him. We'd all lost someone. My husband Daniel had been his big brother, the one who bailed him out of bar fights, who covered his debts more than once. But over time, Thomas's fixation sharpened into something uglier. He started dropping the word thief when I was within earshot. He'd tell mutual friends I was hoarding the medal out of spite. And then, one summer evening, I came home to find my front door lock scratched to hell, and the display case in my living room moved just enough to make my stomach turn. The medal was still there, but that was the day I bought a safe. Back in the courtroom, I let him talk. The more he ranted, the more desperate he looked, cheeks flushed, voice, cracking, hands trembling, not from righteousness, but from fear. I could see it in his eyes. He knew what was in the red sealed letter in my bag. The judge finally lifted a hand. "Mr. Hayes, that's enough. You'll have your turn to speak." Thomas sat, but his glare burned holes through me. My attorney leaned in, murmuring, "We knew he'd blow up. Just stay steady." Steady. That was my job. In combat, in family and court, you stay steady. You don't let the adrenaline own you. I glanced over my shoulder. In the back row, Michael sat between 2 of my friends from the Veterans Center, his small hands folded in his lap, eyes wide. He wasn't used to seeing grown men throw tantrums. I gave him a slight nod, the kind you give a fellow soldier across a battlefield. "I've got this." The judge looked at me. "Captain Hayes, when it's your turn, we'll hear your side. Until then, please remain composed." I almost smiled. Remain composed? I'd been doing that for years, ever since Daniel came home in a flag-draped coffin and the Army placed that silver star in my hands. Ever since I promised him quietly and without witnesses that no one would ever take it from our boy. And now, with the weight of that promise still in my chest, I felt my hand brush the edge of my bag where the red sealed letter waited. Not yet. Not until it would matter most. I took a slow breath, the kind that smells faintly of old varnish and paper dust in a courthouse, and sat straighter in my chair. The battle for that medal wasn't about to be fought in the desert or in some back alley. It was going to be fought right here under flickering lights with words as weapons. And I was ready. The thing about a medal, any medal, is that it's never really just about the medal and ribbon. It's about the weight it carries, the people behind it, the moments you can't unsee once you've lived them. Daniel earned his silver star on a day when the sky looked like it might swallow us whole. Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. Summer heat so brutal it baked the sand into something like glass under your boots. The air was full of that fine tan dust that got into everything, your weapon, your canteen, your lungs. We were part of a convoy escort mission. Routine, as far as Afghanistan went. Daniel was driving the second Humvee, and I was in the lead vehicle manning the comms. The road ahead stretched straight as a rifle barrel lined with mud brick compounds and patches of dry grass that hid more than just weeds. It happened fast, like these things always do. A sudden crack sharp, not the dull pop of distant gunfire, but the unmistakable boom of an IED. My headset went white noise deaf for a second. The third Humvee in the line was hit. The blast threw it sideways, and in the swirl of dust and shouts, I heard someone screaming over the radio, "Man down! We've got a man down!" Daniel didn't hesitate. He never did. Before the dust had even cleared, he was out of his seat running toward the rec rifle in hand. "Hayes, hold your position," I barked over the comms. But he kept going. I saw him through the Hayes helmet, low shoulders forward the way you move when you know you're heading into fire. Rounds started kicking up dirt near his boots, enemy fire from a cluster of trees off the road. He didn't even slow. Reached the wrecked Humvee, yanked open the smoking door, and dragged Sergeant Murphy out by his vest. Murph was limp, blood darkening the front of his uniform. Daniel threw Murph over his shoulder like he was hauling a bag of grain and ran. You could see the strain in his legs, the grit in his jaw, but he didn't stop until he dumped Murph behind the cover of the lead vehicle. That's when the shot hit him. A single, ugly crack from somewhere in the tree line. Daniel staggered, dropped to one knee, but waved me off when I started toward him. "Get Murph out!" he shouted. I grabbed Murph's vest and hauled him the rest of the way, while Doc Simmons started working on him. When I turned back, Daniel was still firing toward the trees covering our retreat. Blood was soaking the front of his vest. We pulled him out too. He was still breathing when we loaded him onto the medevac chopper. His hand found mine for just a second. "Don't let them forget Laura," he said. He didn't make it to the field hospital. 3 months later, back stateside, I stood in dress uniform on the parade ground at Fort Carson. The air was crisp, autumn leaves rattling across the asphalt. My son Michael clutched my hand so tightly his little knuckles went white. The general stepped forward, his face carved from stone, and placed the silver star in my palm. His voice carried over the crowd. "For gallantry in action." Sergeant Daniel Hayes distinguished himself by acts of heroism above and beyond the call of duty. The words blurred after that. All I could see was Daniel on that road running through gunfire like it was just rain in his way. Michael didn't really understand the medal then. He thought it was Daddy's special coin. But he knew it was important because I put it in a shadow box with his father's picture and the folded flag they'd given us at the funeral. I hung it in the living room where sunlight hit it every morning. The thing about a medal like that is it doesn't belong to the army once it's given. It doesn't even belong to the country, not really. It belongs to the people who paid for it in blood, in grief, in promises made over hospital beds. That's why Thomas's obsession always felt like a personal attack. It wasn't about family pride or keeping Daniel's memory alive. It was about possession, about control. He wasn't there that day on the road in Kandahar. He wasn't there for the ceremony or the funeral. He wasn't the one who woke up every night for years to the sound of phantom gunfire in their head. But he wanted that medal like it was his birthright. And I had promised Daniel. That's why, sitting in that courtroom years later, my hand hovering over the red, sealed letter in my bag, I felt a strange kind of calm. Not the absence of fear. Fear was always there, but the steady resolve of someone who'd already been through worse. If Thomas thought he could strip away Daniel's honor, he didn't understand what that medal meant. And if it came to it, I was ready to remind him in front of the judge, the jury, and the whole damn town exactly how it had been earned. After Daniel's funeral, I tried to keep the peace. That's what you do. When grief is fresh, you give people space to be messy, even if they say or do things that sting. The first few months, Thomas played the grieving brother well enough. He called sometimes to check on Michael. He'd ask if I needed help with the yard or fixing the leaky faucet. I didn't accept most offers. Truth was I needed my space, but I appreciated the gestures. Then slowly, the conversation started shifting. One evening, just before the first anniversary of Daniel's death, he showed up unannounced. The air outside was heavy with summer humidity, the kind that makes the curtains stick to the window frame. He stepped inside, tracking dust onto the welcome mat. His eyes drifted almost immediately to the shadow box hanging over the mantel. "You know," he began, hands shoved deep into his pockets. "Daniel always said that medals should be shared. Put somewhere people could see it. Maybe in the lodge back home. Folks would be proud to have it there." I was tired from work, tired from keeping a 10-year-old boy fed and in bed on time, tired from trying to sleep through my own memories. I just said, "It's staying here, Tom." Daniel gave it to me. For Michael. His smile thinned. "Well, maybe you just think it's yours. But that's family history, not just yours to keep locked up." The real shift happened at a 4th of July cookout the next year. It was one of those humid Colorado afternoons where the sky feels close enough to touch. Michael was running around with a sparkler, laughing with the neighbor kids. I was refilling the potato salad when I caught Thomas in the corner talking to my cousin Maggie. "She's just keeping it to herself," he was saying, "like she's the only one who lost him. That medal should be in our family's display case. She's making it all about her." I didn't say anything. Not then, but something in me hardened. After that, he stopped pretending. I'd hear from friends that Thomas was telling people I'd stolen the medal from the family, that Daniel had meant for it to go to his father's estate, never mind that Daniel never said any such thing. He started showing up less at family gatherings, and when he did, his eyes would linger on that shadow box, like it was a safe full of gold. The breaking point came 2 years later. I'd taken Michael to visit his grandparents in Pueblo for the weekend. When we came home Sunday evening, the first thing I noticed was the faint smell of cigarette smoke in the living room. I don't smoke. The second thing was the shadow box. It was still on the wall, but it was crooked, tilted at an angle that made my stomach drop. I stepped closer. The latch on the back had been tampered with. I checked the rest of the house. No signs of forced entry, but the back window lock looked scratched. The old wooden frame was chipped. I knew who it was. I called the police. They came, took a report, dusted for prints. They found some partials, not enough to make an arrest, but one of the officers, a vet himself, pulled me aside. "Ma'am, whoever it was, they were after that medal. Might want to keep it somewhere safer." That night, after Michael was asleep, I took the shadow box down from the wall. I opened the back, removed the silver star, and placed it in a small fireproof safe I'd bought the next day. The medal never went back on the mantle. From then on, my relationship with Thomas was all business, and only when unavoidable. I kept records of every conversation. If he texted me about the medal, I saved it. If he left a voicemail, I backed it up. Then about 6 months before the court date, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Thomas's lawyer. He was suing me for wrongful possession of military property. He claimed the medal belonged to the Hayes family as a whole, and that I had withheld it from rightful heirs. I stared at the letter for a long time, the words blurring. I could almost hear Daniel's voice in my head, calm but firm. "Don't let them take it, Laura." I called my lawyer the next day. She listened quietly, then said, "We'll fight this. You have legal possession, and I think it's time you tell me everything, including anything the Army's ever put in writing about that medal." That's when I remembered the envelope, the one I'd kept sealed for years because Daniel's commanding officer had told me it contained classified details about the operation. I retrieved it from my safe. Heavy cream paper, deep red wax seal, stamped with the Army crest. I hadn't opened it, but I'd always suspected it was my final shield if Thomas ever pushed too far. Now, sitting in the courthouse with that envelope in my bag, I realized today might be that day. From the outside, courtrooms all look the same: polished wood, stiff-backed chairs, the faint scent of old paper and cleaning solution. But when you're the one in the hot seat, every detail feels sharper. The lawsuit hit me like a sucker punch. Even though I'd been bracing for Thomas to make some kind of move, seeing it in black and white with my name in bold under the words defendant still made my stomach knot. His claim was built on two pillars. First, that I was not blood family and therefore had no rightful claim to Daniel's medal. Second, that Daniel had intended for the medal to be housed in the Hayes family lodge, an old wood-paneled building 2 counties over that mostly collected dust and old taxidermy. Intent, of course, is slippery. It can be implied, fabricated, twisted. My lawyer, Karen Mitchell, was quick to point that out. She was sharp with a voice, like she'd been chewing gravel since birth, and she didn't waste time on sympathy. "Laura," she said in our first meeting, flipping through the lawsuit papers, "this isn't about family pride. He's trying to use the court to force you into giving up something he can't legally touch. That medal was awarded to you as the next of kin. That's airtight. The only way he wins is if we let him spin some emotional fairy tale without proof." I nodded, but my throat was tight. He's been at this for years. I thought I don't know, maybe he'd get tired of it. Karen raised one eyebrow. Men like him don't get tired. They get bolder. The weeks leading up to the trial were a grind. I worked during the day, cared for Michael, and spent my evenings digging through old files, military records, funeral paperwork, anything that proved the medal had been given directly to me. Karen filed motions, sent requests for discovery, and drafted a witness list that included Daniel's commanding officer, Colonel Jameson, who had presided over the medal presentation. He was retired now, living in Texas, but when Karen called him, he'd said, "If it's about that medal, I'll be there." The red sealed envelope sat in my safe until the night before the trial. I took it out, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it while the clock ticked past midnight. The wax gleamed under the warm light unbroken. I'd always honored the colonel's warning. There are things in here best left unopened unless you need them. I decided I needed them. The courthouse was busier than usual the morning of the hearing. It wasn't every day that a family squabble over a silver star made it onto the docket. By the time I walked in, Karen at my side, there were a dozen people milling about the hallway, some of them strangers, others not. Thomas was already there, standing with his lawyer, a man in an expensive suit whose teeth were too white to be trustworthy. Thomas caught my eye and smirked the kind of smirk that said he thought this was already won. Karen leaned close. "Don't take the bait. Remember what we talked about: facts first, feelings later." We entered the courtroom and took our seats. The judge, an older man named Robert Eldridge, looked like he'd been carved from the same oak as the bench he sat behind. He was known for being fair, but also for not tolerating nonsense. When the session began, Thomas's lawyer wasted no time painting me as an interloper, someone who had inserted herself into the family's military history and refused to honor Daniel Hayes's true wishes. He spoke in that oily, deliberate way some lawyers do, each sentence polished to sound like truth. I kept my face still. I'd learned that in the Army, never give the enemy the satisfaction of seeing you react. When it was our turn, Karen laid out the facts. She presented Daniel's military record, the next of kin documentation, and photographs from the medal ceremony, showing the general placing it in my hand. "This," she said, tapping the photo with one neatly manicured nail, "is not family property. It is an award granted to the surviving spouse in accordance with military protocol and federal law. The plaintiff's claim is not only baseless, it is an insult to the memory of Sergeant Hayes." The judge's eyes flicked to me briefly, then back to Karen. "Go on." And then came Thomas's moment, the one he couldn't resist, the one I knew was coming. He stood up red, creeping up his neck, and pointed straight at me. "She stole that medal." Karen didn't move. The judge's brow furrowed. "You have no right to it," Thomas went on, voice cracking. "It belongs to the Hayes family. She's not one of us. She's just a widow who thinks she can keep it locked away." The room went still. That was my cue. I reached down, opened my bag, and pulled out the red-sealed envelope. Without a word, I rose and walked it to the bench. The seal caught the light as I placed it gently in front of Judge Eldridge. He looked at it, then at me. "What is this?" "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady. "It's a letter from the Department of the Army. It contains information directly relevant to this case." He broke the seal, unfolded the thick paper, and began to read. I saw his eyes sharpen, his jaw set. When he looked up, his voice was firm. "No one leaves this room." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Bailiff," the judge said, "call in the military police." 4 uniformed MPs entered, boots striking the floor in unison. Thomas's smirk vanished. I stayed standing, my heart pounding in my ears. The real battle was about to start. The bailiff returned with a fresh stack of papers, each bearing that same deep red seal. My lawyer glanced at them, then slid the first page toward me with the care of a man handling dynamite. It was a sworn affidavit from Colonel Raymond Harris, my old commanding officer in Kandahar. He was retired now, but his words carried weight. In crisp military language, he documented the events of that night, the ambush, the chaos, the life-saving maneuver I'd executed under fire. The medal in question, the Silver Star, had been awarded to me after thorough review by the Department of Defense. And then came the last line, typed with no room for doubt. Any claim that this medal was obtained by theft, fraud, or deception is categorically false. I stand by Captain Walker's honor without reservation. I could feel the room shift. The air seemed heavier, quieter. My brother-in-law's jaw twitched. His fingers fidgeted with the edge of the defense table. For the first time all day, he looked unsure. "Your Honor," my attorney said, voice calm but edged with steel, "the defense's entire argument hinges on hearsay and emotional conjecture. These documents, alongside sworn testimony from military personnel, prove beyond reasonable doubt that my client earned that medal through heroism in combat. And now, we must ask, why would someone fabricate such an accusation?" The judge leaned forward, elbows on the bench. "That," he said slowly, "is exactly what I intend to find out." All eyes turned to my brother-in-law. The judge's stare was unblinking, the kind that strips away every excuse. "Mr. Keaton," he said, "you've made serious accusations in open court. On what basis?" Keaton swallowed hard. His gaze darted toward his lawyer, who suddenly found something fascinating on his notepad. I had reason to believe." "No," the judge cut in sharply. "That's not good enough. What reason?" Keaton shifted in his seat, the polished wood creaking beneath him. It was something my sister told me. About money. About her selling something she shouldn't have had." A murmur rippled through the gallery. I sat straighter, my pulse quickening. "Are you saying," my attorney pressed, "that this entire case is based on hearsay from a family dispute?" Keaton's face was now a blotchy red. She had debts, and then suddenly she was fine, and I knew she had that medal." "Enough," the judge snapped. "You're speculating, not presenting evidence. And speculation doesn't strip a veteran of her honor." I should have felt triumphant in that moment, but instead there was a sour taste in my mouth. This wasn't just about the medal anymore, it was about the festering rot in my own family. My mind went back to the months after deployment. I'd been quiet, withdrawn, avoiding most family gatherings. Keaton had tried to bait me before bringing up politics, questioning the war, implying that soldiers were just government pawns. I'd ignored it, thinking it wasn't worth the fight. But maybe I'd underestimated just how far his resentment went. The judge turned to the military police officers, still standing at the back. "You will escort Captain Walker to the side chamber to await my final decision. Mr. Keaton, you will remain seated. I want a recess of 20 minutes. And nobody leaves this building until I say so." As the MPs guided me out, I caught Keaton's eyes one last time. He looked pale now, like the blood had drained from him entirely. But behind that paleness was something uglier, something that told me he wasn't finished yet. The side chamber was cool and dim, with a heavy wooden door that muffled the noise from the courtroom. One of the MPs stood inside with me, silent but watchful. I sat at the long table, my hands flat against the polished surface, trying to steady my breathing. 20 minutes! That was all the time between my current life messy but intact, and the possibility of walking out of here shattered. I thought of my brother Daniel Keaton's husband, who hadn't said a word during the entire trial. Was he embarrassed? Afraid, or did he secretly agree with Keaton? The questions gnawed at me, threatening to pull me back into the same whirlpool of doubt I'd fought for months after returning from Afghanistan. The door opened and my attorney slipped in his tie slightly askew. "You're holding up," he asked. "I'm fine," I lied. "What's going on out there?" He pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "The judge is reviewing the affidavits and the chain of custody logs for the medal. Keaton's story is falling apart." But he hesitated. "There's something else." "What?" "Keaton just tried to introduce a new claim. Says he has a witness who can prove you sold a military award online for cash." I blinked at him. "That's not even the same medal." "I know," he said. "And so does the judge. But Keaton's playing for chaos now, trying to muddy the waters." The MP shifted slightly, his boots squeaking on the floor. My lawyer leaned in. "The judge isn't going to let that happen. But you need to be ready. When we go back in, I'm going to ask you to speak directly to the court. No papers, no filters, just you telling the truth in your own words. You think you can do that?" My throat was dry, but I nodded. I've faced worse than a courtroom. "Good," he said, pushing back his chair, "because the moment you speak, this whole thing changes." The door opened again. The bailiff's voice was brisk back to the courtroom. I rose, squaring my shoulders, and followed the MP into the light. The moment my words left my lips, the silence in the courtroom grew heavy, like wet wool draped over everyone's shoulders. The judge sat still, but his eyes darted to the military police stationed by the back wall. "You understand the weight of what you're alleging?" he asked, his voice low, but cutting through the tension. "I understand perfectly, Your Honor," I replied, steadying my breath, "and I have proof." From my bag, I pulled out the second piece of evidence, the one I'd kept hidden until now. It wasn't a letter, or even a medal. It was a worn, leather-bound journal. The handwriting inside was familiar, painfully familiar. It was my brother-in-law's. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the prosecutor leaned forward. I flipped it open to a page dated 2 years ago, the ink smudged but legible. The entry read, "Sold the medal today. Still don't know if she noticed it missing. If she does, I'll just say she never earned it." My stomach tightened as I read the words aloud. Each syllable felt like a nail in the coffin of his defense. "Objection!" his lawyer barked, shooting up from his chair. "This is inadmissible." "Your Honor, we have no way of knowing." The judge raised his hand. "Sit down, counselor." I looked at my brother-in-law. His face was pale, eyes darting between the journal and the red-sealed letter still on the bench. His hands trembled on the defense table. "You forged records, stole my medal, and tried to destroy my name," I said, my voice trembling, but loud enough for the back row to hear. "Do you even understand what that medal cost me? What I went through to earn it?" For the first time since the trial began, he couldn't meet my eyes. The judge nodded to the military police. "Officers, please approach the defendant." The sound of their boots against the wooden floor echoed like a drum roll. 4 of them moved in unison, their presence swallowing the space around him. The audience shifted uneasily in their seats. His lawyer whispered something urgent, but my brother-in-law shook his head slowly. He knew the fight was over. One of the MPs retrieved a small envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to the judge. The seal matched the one on my letter, a formal military insignia. The judge broke it open and read quickly. His expression didn't change, but his voice was firm. Per the contents of this directive and given the evidence presented, this court will recess briefly. The defendant is remanded into custody of the military police, pending further charges including theft of military property, falsifying records, and perjury. A collective murmur spread through the courtroom. The MPs stepped forward, placing handcuffs around his wrists with a metallic click that seemed to echo far louder than it should. My brother-in-law's shoulders sagged as they guided him away. As he passed me, he finally looked up just for a second. There was no anger left, no smugness, only defeat, and maybe buried deep, the faint glimmer of shame. The moment the door closed behind him, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My legs felt like they could give out, but I stayed standing. I had to. The judge addressed the court. We will reconvene in 15 minutes to finalize these proceedings. This matter is far from over, but one thing is clear. Truth will find its way, no matter how long it's buried. I nodded slightly, my throat tight. People in the gallery turned toward me, some with sympathetic eyes, others still processing the sudden turn of events. I caught the gaze of an older veteran in the back row, his chest covered in ribbons. He gave me a slow, deliberate nod. I returned it. In that moment, I felt the weight of every person who had ever been doubted, every soldier whose honor had been questioned, every truth buried under lies. And I knew this was more than just my fight. The bailiff gestured for everyone to stand, and the judge exited. My attorney leaned in, speaking softly. You realize this isn't just a win for you? This is going to ripple out further than you think. I know, I whispered, and that's exactly what I want. As I gathered my things, the red, sealed letter still lay on the bench in front of the judge's chair. Soon the truth inside it would be on the record for everyone to see. The MPs stood guard at both exits, their presence a reminder that the storm wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time in years, I felt like the tide had finally turned in my favor. I stood in front of the courthouse, my heels sinking slightly into the wet pavement. The storm had passed, but the air still carried that heavy metallic smell of rain, mixed with the faint scent of diesel from the idling police cruisers. The crowd was gone now, the shouting, the chaos, the whispers, all swallowed by the hum of distant traffic. Only a few people lingered, the military police, my attorney, and 2 reporters, scribbling in notepads they hadn't yet put away. Miss Carter, my attorney said, his voice softer now. You don't have to talk to the press. We can walk right past them. I shook my head. No, let them hear it from me. One of the reporters stepped forward. Ma'am, what will you do now that the court has confirmed your innocence? Innocence. That word felt strange in my mouth. Not because I wasn't, I had always been, but because for weeks I had been treated as if my entire life's service had been a lie. I glanced down at the medal in my hands, still gleaming despite the fingerprints on it. My father's name was etched into the back, along with the date he'd earned it. The letter beside it was folded neatly, now the red seal unbroken since the judge had verified it. I'm not here to win, I told them. I'm here to remember. My father died, carrying men out of a burning Humvee under sniper fire. This medal, I swallowed, tightening my grip, isn't just a piece of metal. It's proof that he lived, that he bled, that he was there. And it's my duty to make sure no one erases that. From behind me, I heard a slow shuffle. My brother-in-law, the man who had pointed at me in court and called me a thief, was being escorted down the steps by 2 officers. His head was bowed, his face pale. He didn't look at me. I should have felt triumph. I should have felt vindicated. But all I felt was tired. Tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. The military police saluted as they passed me, one after the other. No words, just a quiet, precise motion, an acknowledgement that I belonged, that I was one of them. The last officer to pass was older, maybe late 50s, with lines on his face that looked carved by years of desert wind. He paused, met my eyes, and gave me a sharper salute than the rest. For your father, he said, and for you. When they were gone, I found myself alone again, except for the rainwater dripping from the courthouse roof into a small puddle at my feet. I thought of my father, of the times he'd told me that service wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about doing the right thing when no one else would. And maybe in the end, that's what this had been about all along. I turned toward the street medal clutched to my chest, ready to go home. Not the home made of bricks and furniture, but the one you carry inside, the one built from every person who believed in you, every truth you refused to bury. If you've ever been in a fight to protect something that mattered, your honor, your name, your family's legacy, I hope you never stop. Even when the world calls you a liar, even when the people closest to you turn away. And if you know someone who's been through that kind of battle, share their story. Let the truth echo louder than the lies. Because sometimes a medal isn't just metal. And sometimes the fight to keep it is the fight to keep yourself.